Yeshiva World. To share his thoughts with us.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary General, Samantha, and fellow ambassadors. Thank you all for joining us as we honor the memory of President Shimon Peres. It is really beautiful to see the nations of the world honoring the man who had so much admiration for all the world's peoples. From his youth in the diaspora, in his immigration to Israel, to his fight for our independence, and his tireless work on behalf of our country, until his very last days, Shimon Peres committed his whole life to the state of Israel. President Peres was a leader who saw everything from economic difficulty to war, but always remind us that we must be optimistic. I had the honor to work with President Peres when I served in the Israeli government as the Minister of Science and Technology. Shimon believed with all his heart in the power of science and technology to bring all peoples together and bring real peace. I remember when I visited him in his office in Jaffa to report about what we are doing in the Ministry of Science and Technology. It was really nice meetings. We looked at the Mediterranean Sea, and I would tell him about the accomplishments, that we were putting more budget into science and technology, that we're working to ensure that science and technology will be accessible to all children in all sectors of our society. But frankly, he was never satisfied. He will always tell me, Danny, it is not enough. With all due respect, it is a great program that you are doing with the Arab Israelis, with the ultra-Orthodox. It is all very important. But what do you have planned next? Tell me what's happening next year, not what you are doing this year. He pushed all of us. He pushed the entire nation to do more and to seek more accomplishments. President Peres once said, and I quote, "For me, dreaming is simply being pragmatic." In a different time, he said, when you have two alternatives, the first thing you have to do is to look for the third that you didn't think about, that doesn't exist. These thoughts, these beautiful pearls of wisdom, do not only summarize the life of Shimon Peres, they are really the story of Israel and the Jewish people that Shimon Peres symbolized. President Peres was not only a warrior for peace, but he had the foresight to establish our defense industries and was the Director General of our Defense Ministry and later Minister of Defense. We speak a lot about Israel today as a startup nation. We take a lot of pride of it, but we forget the difficult economic times we faced in our early years. It was then Prime Minister Shimon Peres who put in place so many of the fundamental pillars that made the modern Israeli economy possible. The passing of President Peres is a great loss for all Israelis, but yet being here in this room, seeing the outpouring of love and respect from around the world, and we see here in the UN, in the Parliament of Nations, the love and respect. This is a real testament to President Peres' respect and love. We will always remember Shimon Peres for reminding us of the never-ending sense of possibility. His legacy is to continue to think, to continue to dream, and that's what we will do. Shimon's vision and leadership will be sorely missed in Israel and here in the UN, and will continue to inspire all of us. May his memory be a blessing. Yehi Zichro Baruch.
Thank you, Ambassador Danon. I now invite his next.
Ambassador Danny Danon, permanent representative of Israel, Ambassador Samantha Power of the United States, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I join with you today in sorrow for the loss of Shimon Peres and gratitude for a life so extraordinarily lived. Throughout my tenure as a Secretary General, I had the privilege to benefit from his wisdom. He was a constant source of optimism, hope, and inspiration. Like so many millions, I deeply admired and respected his leadership and many decades of service for his beloved country Israel and for the cause of peace throughout the Middle East. We often met in times of great challenge. In one especially poignant visit, I met him in Israel on July 23, 2014, just one day before he stepped down as president. Regardless of the difficulties, he was always a voice of calm and wisdom. And as a leading global statesman, he was a welcome and frequent visitor to the United Nations. In addressing the General Assembly, he once directed his remarks to all the people of the Holy Land. I quote, "We read our holy books in different languages." He said, "Yet we pray to the same heavens. The descendants of Abraham should behave like a family with tolerance and solidarity." Unquote. That simple message has never been more important in the region and in our world. That clear-eyed perspective of reaching across the table, of compromising with your neighbor, of finding common ground for the greater good has never been more needed. That kind of leadership is one that we long for and one that we will surely miss. With his passing, let his dedication to peace inspire us to realize the dream of justice, security, and dignity for Israelis, for Palestinians, and for our world. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency, Mr. Secretary General, for his statement. I now invite the United
Thank you so much. Thank you, colleagues, Mr. Secretary General, Ambassador Danon, for being here, and I feel very privileged to have the chance to say a few words as well. Shimon Peres was a man who spent his entire life thinking about and working to build the future of Israel. Speaking about his mentor, one of the founding fathers of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, President Peres once said, "From him I learned that the vision of the future should shape the agenda for the present, that one can overcome obstacles by dint of faith, that one may feel disappointment but never despair. And above all, I learned that the wisest consideration is the moral one." These were the principles by which Shimon Peres lived his life and that guided his service to his country, both inside and outside of government. The future, Peres recognized, requires believers, not necessarily experts. The future is built, not inherited from the prophets. These are his words. Peres was always both a believer and a builder of Israel's future, a builder of community as a young member of Kibbutz Alamot, a builder of Israel's Labor Party, and of Israel's military, which allowed the newly formed country to survive and to defend itself. And Peres was a builder of Israel's diplomatic relationships. We feel very blessed in the United States that one of the closest relationships he forged was with the United States. This nearly 7-decade relationship he began to build in 1950, when the 27-year-old Peres, then head of Israel's Navy, was dispatched here to New York on a defense supply mission. He arrived not speaking a single word of English. Within 3 months, he was fluent. In the aspiration for freedom, he would later say, quote, "Freedom from oppression, from persecution, freedom from violence and evil, freedom from discrimination and ignorance," end quote. Peres saw in Israel and in democracies and in the United States a common cause. But most of all, Shimon Peres was a believer in and a builder of peace. His vision of what was necessary to build peace was clear and unwavering. Israel's security, of course, which he did as much as anyone to strengthen, and Israel's diplomacy, of which he was a maestro. But Peres believed that peace also had to be rooted in what he called moral vision, which he traced back to the Book of Books, and its message that the one invisible God created man in his image, and hence there are no higher and lower orders of man. This belief that all fellow human beings are created equal, are imbued with fundamental dignity, and are entitled to inalienable rights, not only drove his overarching efforts to achieve peace, but also was reflected in the compassion he brought to every individual interaction. And I think this is one of the most remarkable experiences to have when you engage President Perez. He made you feel as if the entire world faded to black, as if time stood still. Every individual he spoke to like they were a prime minister or a king. That respect for people's dignity was his signature trait. He made it his personal duty to ensure that others, particularly the younger generations, would not feel despair. He never lost his own youth. I had the privilege of seeing President Perez in February in Israel, and he said what worried him most about the region was that so many young people had lost their hope. This, he understood, was perhaps the greatest threat to peace. And he understood that a future without the prospect of peace was a horizon without light. In his 2014 farewell speech to the Knesset, President Perez said, "I will not give up my right to serve my people and my country, and I will continue to help build my country with a deep belief that one day it will know peace." Shimon Peres never gave up his right to serve his people and his country, and to his last day, he never gave up on his belief that the greatest service to both was working to make the dream of peace a reality. He saw that the pursuit of peace was the highest form of patriotism. May his vision of Israel's future long define Israel's present. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Power. I now invite Rabbi Eli. תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת הנשיא פרזידנט שמעון בן שרה פרץ שהלך לעולמו בעבור שאנחנו מתפללים בעד הזכרת נשמתו בגן עדן תהיה מנוחתו לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. Excellency, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, distinguished ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. Please join us as we observe a moment of silence in memory of President Shimon Peres. Please rise. Thank you. Please be seated.